everybody. I hope you had a great Easter weekend and you got to spend time with family and friends. We've got a great episode for you today. We're meeting with Charles, who's a former colleague of Dennis, and he is going to explain to us the quote, "Blessed are the peacekeepers," and so much more. Stand by. Here we go. I found myself in a situation where I was in complete darkness. I was in a lot of pain. I was scared. And the only thing I had in my back pocket was what I'd been taught as a young child. And I yelled out in the darkness, or I said out in the darkness, "Jesus, please forgive me of my sins."
Yeah.
And I didn't say it to be saved. The more I look at it, it was a total like admission of guilt. And I was actually repenting. I was ready.
Yeah.
I was ready to accept the punishment. And then
Mm.
suddenly this pinprick of light like emerged. And then it got bigger. And as it got bigger, my pain went down. My spiritual, mental, and emotional, physical pain all went down until I found myself actually standing in the light and
Mm.
all my pain was gone. And I realized I was holding someone's hand and I looked to my right and it was my grandma.
Oh,
I
wow.
looked I looked ahead of me and it was so bright I couldn't see into it, but I could make out the beginning of a golden road made out of golden bricks. I looked to my left and it was totally gray. I looked behind me, it was pitch black, but I could see people floating in the darkness. And they
Wow.
and they looked like they were in pain. And I turned back to my grandma and I said, "Why is it they're so close and they don't know we're right here where pain doesn't exist?" And that's right when I woke up to my wife slapping me in the face, pulling me out of the coma, because if you go past 5 weeks, you turn into a vegetable that's plugged in. Your brain decide I
Yeah.
don't have to breathe. So I came back. I did not come back as a happy person. Um, I wasn't like it wasn't like an immediate change in me. I came back.
Yeah.
The pain was back. I was strapped down to a bed. I wasn't able to make my own decisions. They weren't going to let me out of the hospital. I tried running away a couple times. You know what I mean? I came back just like
Mm.
ready to rage. I picked the bottle back up after like 3 months because I'm a grown man and I'm allowed to drink.
Right. Yeah.
But then I found myself in a day where I had started drinking again, like in the morning, even to face the day. And I was on my way to a therapy appointment. And on the way to my therapy appointment, I looked up at this billboard. And for whatever reason, I don't know what the billboard said, but I had this sudden, just, a wave came over me of if I don't take action now, God's not going to be able to turn this around again. There is no more U-turn. Like this
Woo.
is this is what I got to do. So I walked into my therapy appointment and my therapist could tell I was like shook. And she goes, "What's wrong with you?" And I knew as soon as the words came out of my mouth, it was going to change my reality. You know what I mean? You
Wow.
can't you can't say I'm an alcoholic or I have no control over alcohol and then continue to drink. You know what I mean? Like
Right. Yeah.
it changes everything because everyone now knows that it's hurting you. So now they're concerned and all that kind of stuff. But out of desperation, I said the words, "I've been drinking, it's out of control, and I don't know what to do." My therapist looked at me and said, "You're going to do three things if you want to keep working with me. One is you're going to call your wife right now. You're going to tell her that you're drinking and that there's alcohol hidden in the house, and you're going to ask her to get it out of the house." So I
Right.
did that. I called her and I said, "Honey, I'm so sorry." I called her at work, and I'm
Ooh.
like, "I'm so sorry, but I got to tell you something."
No, he's got a good one though. She jumped right into action and helped.
And
Oh,
I
Just like,
said, because I had screwed up again and like all this kinds of stuff. And I'm like, "I'm drinking. I'm scared. I don't know what to do." And the next words out of her were like, "Okay, what do we do?"
yeah. I mean, like, listen. I mean,
And, and, and,
goosebumps.
and just by saying that, she changed my reality. And she
Yeah.
goes, "What do we
wow.
do?" And I go, "Well, the next thing I have to do is I have to call my mom and I have to tell her I'm heading to the house so I don't go somewhere and find a bottle.
Right.
And then I got to go to an AA meeting tonight." And she's like, "Okay, I'll find you a meeting." And so we found a meeting. That was my first AA meeting. I went in there shaking, terrified.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be there. I was ready to die, but I was torn between having this near death experience and knowing something was on the other side
Right.
and giving up and like dying to drinking after I had been shot in the face and somehow saved.
Yeah.
So I was
Yeah.
in this like moral, crossroad, and I
Yeah.
was just like, all right, I can't die by alcohol. So I went to a meeting, in desperation. And the first thing I heard, just like everyone else usually who goes into an AA meeting doesn't want to be there, someone said, I have an allergic reaction to alcohol. I'm like, that's it. I've got an allergy. No big deal. But it turns out allergies don't really guide your decisions throughout the day. Where's the next bottle? Where's, like that's not how it works. I, and I couldn't accept it was, and pride and ego were so in my way. You know what I mean? Because I had been a
Always are.
police officer. I had seen these people. I said in my head when I saw these people, how could you let this happen to you?
Right.
Like, look what's happening to your family and all this kind of stuff. So now I'm a full on hypocrite, and I have to own all that. And I
Yeah.
have to basically at that moment, I had to do what I was told. I had to get in the program and I had to listen and not think. I had to get
Mm.
out of my own head. You know what I mean? Because if I knew what to do, I would have saved myself a long time ago.
Yeah.
And that's what cracked the door to a higher power to me again. And because of what had happened to me when I was young, I was ashamed because I
Yeah.
had been told by an adult that because of what I had done, I'm a sinner. My
Mm.
parents don't love me anymore, and God
Mm.
doesn't love me anymore. So
Oh,
when you're 5 years old, the only things you really believe in are your parents' love,
right.
God's love, and Santa Claus. And I just lost all three, you
Yeah.
know? And it just so happened, and my dad was in the DEA. We're in Curacao off the coast of Venezuela. And, he's the big police officer. Everyone knows him and all that kind of stuff. And what happened was the guy found out that my dad was, in his mind, a police officer. So he told the kid, if your friend tells his dad, well, first off, he coached us, you're going to hell, you're doing all this stuff. But beyond that, if he tells his dad, I'm going to kill your mom.
Right.
And I heard that as 5 years old, and I was like, no, no, my daddy will fix this. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it'll be okay. And he made me promise I wouldn't tell anybody. So I held on to it for a little bit, and it just so happened at that time, my dad had to have a triple bypass, and
Ooh.
my mom who had just had my little sister was going to go with him, and they decided to leave me on the island with another family. To me, that was confirmation in my little mind. They left. They found out and they left. They're not coming back.
Oh.
Oh, wow.
And it broke my heart. It
Sure.
broke my heart to the point when they came back, I started running away because I wanted to leave them before they could leave me.
Oh,
And
wow.
they always told me, you can tell me anything.
Yeah.
Nothing you could ever do. But for some reason, and now I believe that the devil was whispering in my ear, trying to
Yeah.
cut me out of my connection with the Lord before I could even really get there.
Yeah.
And so I had to do a lot of for 30 years in my own head, trying to manage that memory and figure it out.
Right.
And somehow God knew, well, of course God knew,
Yeah.
but God
Of
knew
course he did.
that by getting shot in the face, by being broken, that I would have to turn over that rock and
Oh,
handle
wow.
what had happened as a little kid. So again,
Yeah.
out of desperation, I walk into my therapist about a year later. I haven't been able to make much progress in my PTSD. And I say to her, because again, I'm about to quit on life. I don't know if this matters, but when I was a little kid and a guy taught my friend and I an adult game, we kept playing it. We enjoyed it because we thought it was cool. But
Yeah.
then we were told we're sinners and that blah, 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 blah. And she looked at me and she goes, that's it. I go, what do you mean that's it? She goes, trauma couples with trauma, especially the ones
Yeah.
we try to bury way down deep.
Yeah.
And sometimes, in order to untangle that trauma we're working on, you got to get some of this trauma out of the way because
Right.
they layer on top of one another.
Mm-hmm.
And I really didn't want to do that, but
Yeah.
I did. And now I know that had I not been shot, had I not gone through what I went through, I never would have sorted out that whatever was in my heart that was still hurting me that I didn't want to acknowledge.
Right.
And now I'm free after being able to do the work and
Yeah.
understanding that I'm not a sinner because
Right.
I kept recycling it in my head, and you don't want to believe it, but it sticks back there somewhere. So anyways,
Yeah.
I got back into my higher power and basically just started getting to the point where I was on my knees praying and just in the end, praying that God protect me from myself
Yeah.
because I have to admit that I am very flawed. And what I
Your
think
own worst critic and your own worst enemy.
am my own worst critic, but sometimes I'm the we're all the classic human, and I get caught up in like everyday world, like, well, maybe if I had this thing, it would make me feel better, or
Mhm.
maybe if maybe if my truck was a little higher, it just dumb little things that you think if
Right.
you get that one extra click, it's
Yeah.
going to make you feel a lot better. But then you get it and you're like, this is hollow. This
Right.
is empty.
Yeah.
And so you end up like getting to the point where you're like, what is even real? And it
Yeah.
turns out it all circles back to that
It's all
point.
inside of us already, like we were talking about before.
And you're just
Mhm.
like, holy smokes. Like, I've been so blind to everything that's going on because I'm so focused on one particular thing or waiting for this one particular miracle to show up. And I'm so keyed in on what that miracle is going to look like and how it's going to feel and what it's going to sound like and smell like that I'm missing everything else that's going on.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's like we're going through this process, and then I ran into Dennis at my dad's funeral. I was like, we should do a podcast because he suddenly was talking to me about the journey he was now on in faith, and it
Yep.
paralleled kind of like what I was going on. And the whole time I've been going on this journey, I've just been in shock and awe, and I
Yeah.
realize more and more that I'm what's in the way most of the time,
Hmm.
and my limits and the way I see the world and all kinds of stuff. So really, it's just been a humbling experience coming full circle and having Dennis go along the way, and now hearing that you're doing the exact same thing in a way. And I'd
Yeah.
love you to explain that a little bit and kind of like
Yeah,
fill me in
Chuck,
and
tell us more about it. I mean,
everybody
I
else.
still, I still haven't got your book. I keep saying I'm going to order it, and I just haven't done it yet. But I'm going to. And once we start talking about doing this, I go, you know what? I'm just going to wait. I want to hear it from you first. Then I'll go get the book and read it, and it'll. I think maybe I'll have a better understanding of it while I read it than if I would have just cracked it open and then started asking you questions. It would have felt more manufactured or interviewing, and we don't want that on this show.
Right.
we
Right.
just we're just a couple guys sitting in the patrol car, waiting for the medical
Sure.
examiner to show up on the call or whatever. We're just bullshitting about life while we got nothing better
Right.
to do.
Yeah. No, I totally
That's
get.
that's the whole idea of the behind it.
Yeah.
Just
I love that. Well, man, just a couple of things. One of the things that we talk about when we go on retreats, and I think I've told you I
yes, the
work for
retreats too.
American Warrior Association, but when we take first responders and military guys up in the mountains for the week, I find that a lot of what you said is things that we deal with. We have to untangle and unlearn so many things, and some of them are just the very definitions. Like there is a definition of guilt, and then there's a definition of condemnation. The condemnation and the guilt only comes from the devil. But if you can separate that from conviction. Conviction is when we have sinned and we know it and we need to repent from it. And then once we repent from it and the Lord throws it away, we move on. But guilt comes from the enemy and it sticks to us. And I mean, it just won't let us go. We can go for years with guilt
Yeah.
and anxiety over the things that happened in our past. But until we can recognize there's a different definition between guilt and conviction, we get rid of the guilt and we just live on conviction alone. And just like you said, I'm my world's most worst enemy. I'm just like you. And I thought of the verse when you said that. Paul said, of all the sinners, I am the greatest. And I
Yeah.
think when a man comes to the understanding and that relationship with the Lord, or whatever your higher power is, you understand that you are a sinful man in the presence of a great God. Just like when Peter was in the boat and the first time Jesus said, throw your net out. And they pulled in this great catch and he recognized the greatness of God. And he said, Lord, get away from me. I'm a sinful man. I love when you said that. I mean, it's just, it points exactly to where you are in your life and your relationship with the Lord. And I think that's so cool. But um, yeah, just the definitions and untangling a lot of our hurts. Um,
Yeah.
we deal with moral injury, and moral injury is common to everybody. Everybody's
Mhm.
got it. But the
Yep.
reason we take first responders and military people on our retreats is because what you said, the compounding effect of moral injury.
Mhm.
Like if somebody's got a moral injury because their dad left when they were 8 years old and he went off with another woman, that's a moral injury to a child and they grow up with that hurt. But when you become a cop or a fireman, or if you go in the military and you see these things over and over, and you don't have time to process, you deal with a call, and then
Mhm.
beep, beep,
Yeah.
beep, you've got another call. It's time to go on the next one. You can't process that one. You get up the next day, boom, you hit it again. You get another couple of calls, and you never
Yeah.
have time to deal with it. So that's why it's so important for us to take first responders and military, get them away, and give them some tools that they can take back home to help with that moral injury, so they can be better
Absolutely.
husbands and better fathers in their lives. So
And say it one more time, the organization that it is, so the
yeah.
viewers can reach out.
American Warrior Association,
Okay,
and the website is awa-usa.org.
perfect.
The trips are
Okay.
free. Um, it's a Monday through Friday. We usually go to California up in the Sierra Nevada, or we go to the northern part of Colorado, and we just get away for a week. We go horseback riding. We take some hikes. We spend a couple hours a day just going over some biblical tools. Just like I'm going to give you one right now. Have you ever read the book Sun Tzu's The Art of War?
I
That is
have.
a big. It's required reading in the Russian military. Uh, British military uses it. It's required reading at West Point. So it's still, even though it was
A
written
lot of
25.
businessmen are starting to get into those philosophies as well, and do their
Yes,
in their speaks and talks are applying some of those principles into businesses and stuff.
So it's
absolutely.
the art of war by who?
Sun Tzu,
Yeah.
Suntzu. Um,
Hmm.
and it is just like you said, it can be used in all kinds of different applications, not just war, because it gives some just great principles that were as good 2,500 years ago as they are today. But
Yeah.
one of them in I think
And
it's his
just
second.
tactics kind of things too.
Yeah,
Tactics with not necessarily even just the enemy. Tactics on how to overcome problems. Just like we were talking about in the last episode about how golf is sometimes related to life because you get
Yeah.
to overcome different little adversaries and adversities rather, and learn how to process them. And those little tools can apply in life as well.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes,
So there's a big crossover with military type stuff and tactics that can go into business, but it can also go into your personal life
right.
and how you can deal with adversities and overcome problems.
for
Yes.
sure.
Go on, Chuck. I'm sorry.
And no, that's fine. But I use a lot of that because it's the art of war, and we talk about fighting a daily war,
Hmm.
spiritual battles. So we sometimes use some of these principles in our spiritual battle. And one of them, he says, if you know yourself and you know your enemy, you need not fear the outcome of 100 battles. But if you know yourself and you don't know the enemy, for every battle won, there'll be a battle lost. And if you don't know yourself or the enemy, you're going to lose them all.
Yeah.
So the key to that, number one, spiritually, when we take that to a spiritual application, if you know your enemy, and the Bible tells us we can know our enemy, he tells us the three main things that the enemy does when he tempts us or attacks us. It's the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life. Well, if we can talk about these things and start recognizing when we're being attacked by pornography, by any kind of temptation, like, oh my gosh, look at that dude's truck. I want that truck, just
Right.
any kind of temptations. When we start recognizing those and we know our enemy, we, we're at 50%. The other 50% is knowing ourselves well. And that goes back to you saying, I'm my worst enemy, because
Mhm.
you recognize your tendencies sometimes to be tempted by
Hmm.
different things. So if you can really be honest and
You have to
self-evaluate,
be honest with yourself, though. Yeah, you're right.
exactly, that's the
And I don't
key.
think a lot of us are ready for that. Or I don't think I was ready for that for a main part of my life.
Right.
majority of my life. I don't think I've been ready for that.
Yeah.
When you first open the book and start evaluating yourself, it is rather
It can be
alarming.
daunting. Yeah, it can be
Yes.
Yes.
overwhelming.
You're like,
Absolutely.
ooh.
Because we do have really thick glasses when we're looking at ourselves, and magnifying glasses are going.
Yep.
We wouldn't. That's the other thing. We talked about this a couple episodes ago. Talk to yourself like you would talk to your spouse or your
Ooh,
child or your mom. Like treat yourself that way.
right.
Well, what does that do to you automatically when I say that? You kind of cringe a little bit, like, "Ooh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't talk to my mom the way I talk to myself, would I? Better not."
If I did,
You
my
know,
dad's gonna slap me upside the head.
And when you
road
start
right.
really tuning into that voice, when you can start hearing that kind of like manipulator playing, there are some crazy things, at least in my head, that it says. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
some just outlandish. And sometimes I found myself almost feeling guilty because this thought comes through.
Right.
Uh, but I'm starting to learn that maybe I just need to, like in meditation, and instead of being like, oh, there's one thought, there's two thoughts, there's three thoughts, it's just you're like noticing, okay, that's a thought. That's a
Yeah.
thought. You're just kind of letting it go by. Does that ever happen to you, Charles? Is that like, does
Absolutely.
that make sense?
Uh,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know,
you got to learn how to let go and not grab onto it as it's going by, right? Go ahead.
Right.
no, yeah, there's a Bible verse that says, take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. And it's almost like our mind has got to be a filter, and everything that comes in, think of it being a cop. You're going to call, you grab somebody,
Yeah.
you arrest them because they've done something wrong, and you put them in jail. When you take every thought captive, you arrest that thought, and you analyze it and go, is this a good thought or not? If it's not, just like you're throwing someone in jail, throw it away and get rid of it. Um, but you'd also mentioned something about the deception. Satan has three main attacks, but if you look in the
Yeah.
Bible, every time he attacks someone, he uses deception. When he talked to Eve, he said, did God really say if you eat this apple, you'll die? When he talked to Job's friend in the book of Job, when they come and they tempt him, or they try and uh, they tell him that he deserves all the things that he's gotten from God. It starts off, Elihu, one of the friends, he's lying in bed, and the tempter comes to him in a dream and says, can a man really be righteous before God? So there's so many places in the Bible where
Yeah.
the enemy will just whisper that thought in your ear, and you'll
Mhm.
be like, I've got to take that thought captive. I've got to make sure that I filter that before I let that go in, because if it goes in here, it's going to sink down into the heart. So
Right.
It's going to affect you.
that was a great point. I'm glad you brought that up.
And I'm starting to learn that as much as we don't want it to, like more stuff matters than I want it to. So
Yeah,
like, and I'm learning that the hard way because I'm more of like, I'm going to try it and well, how should I say this? I'm going to keep trying it to see if I can conquer it. One is like if I'm listening to aggressive music in the gym, you know what I mean?
right,
I'm like, today I can handle it. I get in
right,
there, then I start picturing like somehow it merges into now I'm in a battle, now I'm in a war, now these
right.
memories are coming up, now I'm recycling, now real feelings are coming up, and now I'm
Uh-huh.
about to make a phone call to someone to tell them that they were an a-hole 3 years ago. You know what I
Right.
mean? And I get caught in like this like crazy, just like
Web.
and and
Web of lies and deception
and then my
from the
Absolutely.
wife
great
and then
deceiver.
my
Yep.
wife's my little angel because I've mentioned before that that music can do that to me, and she'll be like,
Right.
"Well, what kind of music were you listening to?" And I'm like, "Well,
Little Led
maybe not."
Zeppelin,
But it's
like
like
AC.
I want to keep trying it to see if I can almost not conquer it, but do it without being
You want
taken
to
over.
you want to overcome it
Yes.
on your own fruition. You don't want it
Yeah.
to feel like you got help by doing it. You're a
Yeah.
man. You're an alpha male guy. That's what it is. We can fix our own problems.
But
That's
it's
how
so
we
And
much
you,
feel.
easier to just be like when like your mind says, you know what, screw this, just give it to God. When you
yeah.
finally run into something that's just driving you crazy, you can't make it through it, blah blah blah. There's no way through, and then you're just like, give it to God,
Right.
and then there's a way through,
Right.
one that you didn't see,
Yep.
and it's just so it's such a shame that I have to get all the way to the point where I'm about to collapse to like reach out. I don't understand it. Why I keep
Yeah.
grabbing the wheel too, like
Yeah.
Jesus take the wheel, and then
Yeah.
something I'll see something I'll get scared and I'll grab the wheel
Yeah.
Such a
and
good
Well,
analogy.
I
you
tell you,
know
there's two things that address that. 1 Corinthians uh, 10:13 says, no temptation has taken you except that which is common to man. And God is faithful. He has provided a way out so that you may stand up under it. He will always provide us a way out. Like you're saying, man, I want to battle this and I want to see if I can conquer it. The Bible also tells us there's only four sins, or there's four places in the Bible where it says you either fight sin or you flee from it. And as a man, I think it's so important for me in my life to know what are the sins that I have to flee from and
Yeah.
which ones can I stand firm and fight? And just your thought of the
Oof.
music, that's one of those you can stand and fight all day long. The Bible gives you authority to stand and fight that. But like sexual sins, and I've got it somewhere up in here, I can find it, but sexual sins is one of them, but there's four sins that the Bible says don't try and stand there and fight it because you will lose.
Yeah.
Run and flee from it and live to fight another day.
You know why it's so hard for us to fight sins of the flesh?
I'm
Because
weak.
when,
I know that's me, but
well, no, I mean, because our flesh isn't helping us. Our flesh doesn't care.
no,
Our flesh
no,
doesn't go to heaven.
that's right.
It's earthly. So it
It
wants to
will
be
fight
around the
against
earthly
us.
stuff.
Yep.
That's
There's
why it's already
no.
set up against us a little bit from the get-go in a way to be deep about it, I guess.
Yeah,
It
But
makes
it's
absolutely.
all there inside of you. You're made in his image, so it's there.
That's
You
right.
just got to find it. You got to ask it the right way, and you got to research the right way. You got to read the right ways. You got to
it,
Yes.
really get connect spiritually and do it.
it
Yeah,
makes me
It's
think of
absolutely.
a thought. Are we physical beings having a spiritual experience, or are we spiritual beings having a physical experience?
Yeah,
And I'm starting to realize we're spiritual beings having a physical experience,
yeah,
Great insight. Yes.
especially based on when I had my near-death experience. The overwhelming feeling was that I had returned home.
Oh,
It
wow. Yeah.
what it wasn't that I was there for the first time. I had returned home, and
yeah,
that kind of makes it for me we're a spiritual being having a physical experience. It almost
Yeah.
makes you think like sometimes we're going through grades in school. Like we
yeah.
we come from this place of like perfect love in heaven, and then God goes, "All right, kindergarten is going down to earth and seeing if you can do it on your own without me being right
Ooh.
over your shoulder." Once you prove
Yeah.
that to me, then we can move on to, I don't know, but it's just like when you, yeah, there, it's
Maybe
just,
something to explore more. I like it.
it, it's,
It certainly
it,
is.
it's just the idea of like, I know nothing. And so like these
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
outlandish things there could be something there. And Dennis really talked about it a lot with the sphere of, what do you call the
yeah. The sphere of truths or perspectives.
pure, yeah,
Uh, you know,
perspectives.
basically it starts really simple. Two sides of the ball. The classroom, the instructor says like, what color is that side of the ball? What color is that side
Mhm.
of the ball? They're both right because one side is blue and one side is red.
Right.
But only the instructor that can see both sides knows that it's cut in the middle or painted in the middle. You have to go to that side and see that perspective to see the red. You
Yep.
have to go to that side to see the blue.
Yep.
So if you only see blue, just change the degrees a couple times of your perspectives. You'll start seeing it from another angle.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
But instead of keeping it just two-dimensional, let's make it three-dimensional. It's a
right.
whole globe of perspectives because
Yeah.
up and down too come into play.
Yeah. As a cop, I saw it. If you got four people sitting on four corners of an intersection and two cars come through and have an accident, all four people are going to have a different
Yeah,
Mhm.
story, but none of them are lying about it. They're all telling the truth, but they've all seen it from different perspectives. So yeah, I love that. That's a great, great insight.
yeah,
Dennis used to say that to people on calls when they'd be upset. Like they hit me. And they'd be like, listen, there's your truth, their truth, and then the middle there's the truth.
Yeah.
So like
yeah,
or however you said it, there's your version, their version,
Yes.
the truth is somewhere in the middle.
yeah.
So
Absolutely.
that's funny. So
Well,
you take these individuals reach out to you independently, right? They're like, I need to do something, or is someone else reaching out for them, or is it how's that work?
originally, it started out with, and from what I understand, the organization is only about 5 or 6 years old, but they started out with Facebook ads and
Okay.
just word of mouth. And I'm pretty there. Some of the founding guys were from the SEALs, and they kind of were doing it for special forces.
Yeah.
But once they got a bunch of the special forces through. I think they just realized that they needed to open it up to all military. So for the first couple of years, it was just military, and then there was a push about 2 years ago. Hey, law enforcement guys are dealing with this as well. So now we're doing first responders, but
Right.
it is like the state of Texas has mandated through the legislature that each department has to give an officer 40 hours a year of mental health and wellness.
Okay.
So what AWA has done is gone to some of these departments and said, look, we can offer this to you and be your exclusive provider of this. Fort Worth PD has signed a contract with us. Dallas PD has signed.
Wow.
U.S. Customs Border Immigrations has signed a
Nice.
contract. They're working on Houston, Austin, and San Antonio. Once they can get the majority of Texas, they want to expand this out nationwide. But
Great.
anybody from New York to California can get online and go for free. I mean, it's not limited to anybody in Texas. Everybody can
Awesome.
go. And usually, if you call to get in, I mean, it's like the next trip within 3 or 4 weeks. You're on a trip. So
That's
um,
really cool.
Wow. It is cool, and it's such a great opportunity to provide some healing.
Yeah.
I've seen guys, it's biblically based, but we do not push religion on anybody. I've had all kinds of different religions in a lot of my programs that I've gone on.
Yeah.
And it's actually fun to just sit down and have conversations about what are some of the differences between my religion and your religion, my faith and your faith.
Yeah.
And so it's not an offensive, oh, you got to know this and you got to do this or else.
Right.
But at the same time, I've seen several guys who put everything they have into it. I mean, they come and they really want some healing. And I've seen some guys come to Christ. We've had some baptisms and it wasn't our idea. It was guys that came on the trip that were just like, hey, we're up in the mountains and there's a lake here. Can we get in this lake and be baptized? And I'll
Wow.
tell you, it's freaking cold, but we'll do it. We'll get in that water. Oh my
Get the
gosh.
campfire going so you can get warmed up when you get out.
Me too. So, and what? I'm glad you said we usually have a campfire most nights. And there's something about men getting around a campfire and talking and being honest, opening up, being
Yeah.
transparent, just sitting for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
And there's so much healing involved in that.
Yeah.
I
And
think
Because
you
we're
find,
finding that very much the case, like even with this podcast,
yeah,
just between Cam and I, it is very much like that. Let's just be honest, sit around the campfire and talk
yeah,
about our feelings and stuff, and then to try to get more people involved into it. And
yes,
what I think Cam said a couple episodes ago that really resonates right now in this moment is, oh shoot, now I just almost lost it. Don't you
it'll
just
come
love
back.
it? Um,
happens to me
yeah,
all the time.
increasingly more and more as I get older too. Shoot, I
Well,
wonder
you
if it's
guys are quite a
connected.
bit younger than me. I can
Yeah, quite a
At
bit.
least I can say I got shot in the head when I forget stuff. That's a great comment. Like, give me
default.
a break. I got shot in
That's
the head.
right.
But
Yeah. What are
Gosh.
you gonna do to argue with that one?
Yeah.
Um,
yeah, I find that it was all right. So I've been in a couple situations where I was talking about what I had been through with kind of like-minded individuals who had like been
Mhm.
through other stuff. And one of the ways we would do that is sometimes we would just go to a park and we would just sort of walk. We wouldn't talk a whole lot, but we would just walk.
Right.
And I think during that time, I was really processing, okay, what am I willing to share? What am
Yeah.
I willing to kind of get out there? And by the end of the walk, you've kind of built some trust or whatever you're doing, the horseback riding, the hiking, whatever it is.
Right.
And you sort of like get around these people, you see them doing the same things you are. You're also in your situation, you've been told you're around like-minded individuals who are experiencing the same things. And
Yeah.
in
that
in
bumps the
that
comfort level, right?
Absolutely. It,
Yeah.
it it kind of like if you hear someone else share, you're willing to give a little bit more, and
Right.
then somehow when you give that little bit more, you're inspired to say that extra little sentence. And then that makes someone else kind of like build off of that. And it's really interesting how you're like tiptoeing around the idea of like life is messed up.
Right. Yeah.
Like
Oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
yeah.
you,
Yeah.
you all
That's.
want
I
to,
mean, you're right back towards what the point I was trying to remember. You don't realize the thoughts in your head they seem so foreign sometimes. They seem so oddball. They seem so out of it. Like I have to be the only one that thinks of something this stupid, right? So when you get around the guys in the campfire or in these podcasts and you start talking about some of these ideas that you, you're the only ones that ever felt them, probably you think.
Right.
All
Yeah.
of a sudden, well, you feel it. You feel it. Oh, I'm
Mm.
not as so abnormal as I thought. I am more normal than I realized.
Yep.
This is kind of what life is. This does happen. We
Mhm.
do have bad days. We do have sad days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do get tempted. We fail sometimes. We push through.
And
I
Mhm.
liked your point earlier. Don't let the guilt get you down. Stick to your
Yeah.
convictions that you know that was wrong. So I like that
Right.
little thing that you said earlier. But I just interrupted you, Cam. Go ahead.
No, I interrupted you. My bad. But what I was going to say, oh, now I forgot it. I got something. Um,
Ah,
oh,
that's so
shit.
wrong.
It was,
Oh,
oh, I forgot what I was saying.
Well, I think
Um,
where y'all were going, it's that saying, "Misery loves company,"
yeah.
and
mm,
we do not stand on that. But in the same aspect, if someone opens up and they share their story and realize that, like you said, it is common, we're
yeah.
all dealing with these things, then it is so much easier to open up and to tell your story.
And then actually, like when you hear these people sharing what they've been through and they feel weak, you see strength in them. Or you're like,
Yeah.
are you kidding? You know what I mean? Like you were injured and then you kept going and then like
Yeah.
whatever. You know what I
And
mean?
that just
When
gave them some affirmation and strengthened their convictions and got their confidence going back on the upward directions. This is
and
why it's
if
all
you're
good.
Absolutely.
strong because you didn't quit and I haven't quit yet, then maybe we're strong and we're not here actually as patients. We're
Hmm.
here to come together as individuals who've been through something
Yeah.
to gain strength from it,
Yeah.
instead of being like a, because I think a lot of times, like I've gone into those situations feeling like a patient, like I'm
Yeah.
broken and I got to pee here. I wish I wasn't broken, all this kinds of stuff. And it's not that I'm broken. I've just been through something that I'm recovering from. And now I see you going through something that is above and beyond what anybody else I know is going through. You look strong to me, brother. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you look
Yeah.
great. And then all of a sudden you're able to, it's like Dennis was talking about earlier. You never talk to yourself the way you would talk to somebody else who you're trying to encourage. And
Right.
and these are straight up strangers that you didn't know prior to that week you went on your retreat. And now you're building them up out of love, out of
Yeah.
faith, out of confidence. And then somehow that someone says something to you, and it's weird because the first time you're like, no, 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 not me, you. Like
Right.
you're strong. No, 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 not me. And then they look at you and basically grab you by the collar and say, "Do you realize
You're
what you've
strong
done?"
too.
And
Yeah.
you're like, "Huh?"
And I think we need that sometimes as guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I
and they
think
just
we're made to have that happen sometimes. We're
slap you
made to. We
around.
are
Wake up.
communal. We are communal people.
That's
We're meant to
right.
be around each other.
And then you walk away and you're like, "We're strong.
Yeah.
I'm strong.
Yep.
I'm not weak. I am strong. I've got a lot to learn, but the truth is, it turns out everybody else has a lot to learn. And the
Yeah.
more I dive into these things that, in a way, I've been not shamed, but like embarrassed a little bit about, because whatever you grow up and people say, oh, you're a Christian or you have religion, they're like, oh, good for you, and like all that kind of stuff. So I think I kind of was like almost hid my faith a little bit. But
Yeah.
now as a man and like leaning into it and seeing it coming true and seeing the miracles and like now
Right.
now we're literally yelling it as loud as we can to as many people will listen. And it comes out every episode and we don't even mean it to.
Yeah.
We don't.
Well,
We're
then,
talking about golf one episode and then God comes up. We're talking about, Randy who had, gone through a crazy situation where she thought her only option was suicide and God comes up.
mm,
Like
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
amazing what has happened. And again, it's just so
Yeah.
weird that we're the ones doing this because it was never the intention. It's just like it's like
Hey,
it's like we found a golden nugget and we're yelling around going, "Hey, there's gold over here!"
yeah.
And everyone's like, "No, there isn't." And then you
That's
got to
small
get
stuff. Yeah.
closer. You got to get
Yeah.
Yeah.
closer. Look.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And they're like,
Well,
"Oh, it is gold."
in Genesis 50:20, when Joseph was talking to his brothers after the famine in the 7 years, and he brought them to Egypt, he said, "What you meant for evil, God meant for good." And not that y'all ever meant this podcast for evil, but what your intentions were may not have been what God's intentions were, but he
Right.
allowed you to set this up. And once you got it set up, he's like, all right, now my intentions are going to just blow through. So
Yeah.
I love that.
So we're trying to be the glove.
Yep.
Dennis
Try to
was
be the
talk.
glove.
He talked about it. A glove is made in the image of a man's hand, right?
Yes,
And without
sir.
without a hand in it, the glove is useless. Just like we're
Right.
made after the image of God, and without us opening ourselves to His presence, we're
Yep.
not as useful as we could be.
We're not living
Uh,
to our
Absolutely.
potential.
yeah,
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
another angle to this that I remember hearing as well. God put the fish in the water. He put the tree on the land. You take the tree out of the land, the tree will die. You take the fish out of the water, the fish will die. But
Right.
we were made in the image of God.
It's right.
You take us out of away from God, you're going to be spiritually. You're spiritually going to die. You spiritually die.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So
yeah,
Yeah.
that's another
absolutely.
angle. But just keep being the glove. We just want to be the glove. We're
Yeah.
animated for the purpose of sharing God's love and
Mhm.
making the world a little bit better place as best any way we can.
Yep.
And if that's, I mean, and you can, whatever your higher power is, we say God. I say love a lot.
Yeah.
Love is the higher power because Jesus is love.
Yeah,
So I usually just say love a lot because that way it takes. I'm not saying the word Jesus to a stranger. Then I don't go automatically to that turned off religious Jesus freak kind of mode, like get away from me
Yeah.
type of thing. Because I used to be that person too. So I'm just being sensitive to the whole idea. Like, listen, I'm just talking to talk. You can like it or not. You can believe it or
Right.
not. It's not going to change me. I'm
Yeah.
having a
yeah.
good time doing this. This feels good. I love hanging out with my buddy Cam. I'm love catching up with you again. I haven't seen you in shoot what 20 something years probably. God,
It's been a while.
back in the 90s,
Back,
Nin-
yeah, way back
nin-
in the day.
99 to middle of 2000s is when I was at working with you down there.
Ooh,
And
yes.
you know,
Good days.
Mike, do you remember who my field training officer was? FTO Hansford.
Scott Hansford. Oh
Yep.
my gosh. Yeah.
He came through town a few years back, and I saw him on Facebook being nearby. I'm like, let's hook up, man. So we went
Yeah.
to dinner and had a couple drinks and just bullshitted about life and times back down down there. And at that time, I was still a police officer with Cameron at the department that we worked together.
Cool.
And but yeah, it was just so fun to put. The world is a small place. It
It
really is.
really
And I love
is.
small world
Yeah.
stories. And so getting to see you again through Facebook and now getting you here on this podcast and seeing your face and your laugh and your voice, just the tone of your voice, it brings me back to this comfortable, fun time back down there at that job.
Yeah, we did have some good times. Uh,
So when's your
can I
next?
bring it back to one more
Yeah,
point? And
Absolutely.
me and a couple of the other leaders have been trained in critical incident stress management. And in that, it's like you talked about with the glove. The glove is the world, and our hand that goes up in the glove is our spirit. And without the spirit, our glove is empty. Life is
right.
meaningless. But critical incident stress management is a program that Texas and some other states use when an officer faces some serious trauma. They've been involved in an inline custody death or an officer involved shooting or whatnot. But
Yeah,
they teach three main things, and they teach that anybody that's been through trauma has to confess, they have to write it down, and for whatever reason, they have to stay hydrated. So when I first heard that, they in this class, I went to the basic class and the advanced class. And in the advanced class, they said this is not some kind of ministry that you religious people can come in here and say, oh, you've got to confess, you've got to speak it, blah, 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 blah. Well, I went home and I totally disagreed. So anyway, get into the Bible. Well, the Bible talks about confession all the time. We know that you have to confess your sins to be forgiven of your sins. But I always had this problem with how does writing it fit into God's word? Well, if you start reading the Psalms, King David, who was a warrior, when he would go into battle or when he would, Saul's trying to chase him down and kill him, or, the Philistines, he's in these huge battles and he's a warrior and he comes home and he's dealing with all these mental or moral injuries. He writes them down. And
Yeah.
if you look at the lament Psalms, he starts out and he will define his moral injury. And it fits the definition of today. But as he's writing it down, he goes through this process of oh, all these people are after me. They're trying to get me. And but by the time he finishes, he says, "But I trust you, Lord. You alone are my rock and my salvation, my strength. You're my strong tower." And that is how, when he writes these down, that is a perfect blueprint of how we write things to help us deal with our moral injury. And then when you talk about staying hydrated, we know Jesus Christ is living water. I mean, if you don't have the living water and you're not hydrated fully with him,
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's an empty glove. So,
I like that.
man, I'm so glad you brought that illustration up. I love that.
It's a good one, doesn't it? It rings true. I got one more for you to
It's,
keep with you whenever you do your more of your podcasts.
oh,
The apple tree doesn't eat apples. The blueberry bush doesn't eat blueberries. So what your fruit is being produced, it may not be for you. It's for
right.
somebody else to enjoy. So just bear your
I,
fruit and be a good person and be the living glove.
I have never heard it put like that, but I
Isn't that
absolutely
great?
love it.
I love
That
that
is
one too.
great. That's
That's
good.
really good. That's so
Uh,
funny. And Kate, it's I'm probably going to go off on another tangent here, but Kate and I
That's all right.
like
We're about that sometimes.
we were talking about like, at first, well, I was trying to talk to her about, when I was first trying to find like God, I thought he looked this way, you know, the way I said it to her, I was like, typically when I go to find something, say in our pantry, if you tell me to go get the vanilla wafers, I'm looking for a yellow box with red writing with a cookie on it, right?
Right.
So I know exactly what's going to look like, but what that does is it gives me tunnel vision and I don't see
mm,
everything else that's going on. So for a
mm,
long time, I was trying to find God in this very tight sphere because
Yeah.
that's what I
uh,
thought that's where he'd be.
right.
Um, but it turns out if you let go of that, like we were talking about before, you see all these things that you didn't see before. And then you start seeing how every little one of them is a miracle.
Mm,
Like if you start, like if you can start breaking it down to even like your freaking fingernail is a miracle. The fact that, like somehow God designed us to have this thing show up on all of our little fingers, which
right.
helps us protect it and do whatever we need to do. That's a miracle. The fact that our hearts work the way they do and we can't put together a robotic one or something like that, that's a
Right.
miracle. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it's
Yeah.
like it's funny when you start like your vision starts getting bigger, you start seeing more little things. And you're like, okay, well maybe there's something else here, and you start
Yeah.
appreciating, oh my gosh, like every cell has all this
Oh,
energy and
sorry.
whatever going on in it. So that must mean God's in every cell. That means all these cells that create my body is made by God. So it's like
Right.
it just keeps getting bigger, and none of it's like, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just the expansion of thought and possibilities, and
Well,
Mm,
you're not confining yourself to what the world says God is, or what any
right.
right.
preconceived notion you might have had throughout the times that you weren't really being religious and weren't studying and weren't reading your Bible and praying and all
Yes.
that kind of stuff.
And now
So,
that I hear that, that was a barrier
Yeah, absolutely,
because
absolutely.
I had heard all these things, and you hear it through the news with, whatever religion and this religion, this religion. So you put them all in a box and
mm-hmm.
you're like, I don't fit in that box.
Yep.
So it's not for me, but you've actually like put a barrier between you because you formulated an idea of what it's going to be before you even got in it.
Right.
Yeah,
Whoa. Okay.
I think just like a human being has DNA.
it got bright in there all of a sudden.
Yeah.
The light bulb went
I
off.
think we've got physical DNA and I think we've got spiritual DNA. And our
Yeah.
spiritual
Absolutely.
DNA makes us just as different from any other spiritual being than our physical DNA does. And so if I am so different from everybody else, even though we share a lot of similarities, my relationship with God and how I receive his revelation and how I am able to witness or be a living testimony is going to be completely different than say my wife's or my son's or y'all's.
Yeah,
Our ministries are going to be completely different. We've all got the same goal, but we're going to approach it differently because
yeah.
our spiritual DNA is different. So yeah, I totally
Yeah.
agree with that.
And how we're being
Right.
used could be different. How we're being used by
Absolutely.
Jesus could be different too, or
Look at your
universe, or
podcast. I mean,
love, or
yes.
yeah, yeah,
It is.
yeah,
It is funny. Yeah, it is. It is. It is funny, and we hope that we're planting seeds of shade we never sit under.
Right.
And that carries to someone in the moment where they're really panicking and they're lost and they can just remember one little thing that we said and that might just
Abs-
help them hit their knees. Like
Absolutely.
I I pray on my hands and knees now every night. You know, like
Oh,
I get
that's,
down on the ground, I shut the door, I get on down on the ground, I do the prayer.
mm,
And it's so funny how, like, when you first get into prayer life, I'm guilty of it. I was asking for things. Or actually, no, I first started with bargaining. And I'm like, if you
Yeah.
give me this, I'll do
if
this.
then,
Yeah, like I'm willing to sacrifice this if you give me this. And God's
right.
just laughing at me the whole
How
time.
how
As I'm,
arrogant are we? How
yeah,
arrogant are we,
exactly. As
really?
I'm
You
trying to
know,
Oh,
negotiate,
how
oh,
arrogant are we?
like maybe
That could
you're
be a
right,
whole
Mark.
other episode right there,
let
man.
me count the ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you really break it down like that, man, we are some pretty arrogant little creatures, aren't we?
And then you start getting more like in line, and then like you realize every time you're praying, you're asking for stuff, and like that's not. And then you go full circle to where you're like, this happened to me. This might sound outlandish, but like I've come to the point where I just want to watch Jesus's feet and just say
Mm,
and
yeah,
and like I find myself like praying and trying to just say thank you and thank
yeah.
you and thank you and thank you
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
thank you for the things you didn't give me that I wanted. Thank you for the
Oh,
things that I
yeah,
went through that I didn't want to go through. You know what I mean? Like thank
yeah.
you for protecting me from myself,
Yeah.
because my life would be way different,
Oh, yeah,
and it was way different when I was trying to run it, and it was empty. I'm not going to say it's empty because there's a lot of cool things, but God was there the whole time. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
yeah, it's just,
You just
and
had to turn your radar on.
just an expansion of mind and
You
like,
had to turn your radar on so you could catch him. He was there all along. You just weren't looking for him.
exactly. And his
Yeah.
patience, and like just
Oh,
I am just like so blown away by like, I'm just like, man, because you start getting to the point you're like, I'm not worthy. I don't know why this is happening.
yeah.
Like I hope you picked the right guy. And
Wait till you get 50, it just gets even worse.
yeah.
No kidding. I've turned 53 next month.
Oh,
So I've
yeah. I
got,
find myself constantly going, why? What am I doing here? I am an absolute nobody, but yet you allow me to do some pretty cool things.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's just, yeah, his favor is just unreal.
yeah.
My
Anyways,
prayers now more are just like I know. Is I like I'll have a thought of something enter my mind about whatever's going on in my life, good or bad, whether I'm worried
Yeah,
about something or thankful for something, whatever direction that thought is going, I know. And not like
yeah,
a condescending way, just like, I know.
God's
yeah,
funny.
Man, I mean, I'm struggling a little bit with this one thing that I can't, I know. I know
yeah.
you're going to get me through it. I know.
No, yep.
I still
There's a
believe in you,
point.
Jesus. I know you got something for me. I know you do. I know you do. It's just like, it's constant. I know, I know, I know. It's like all I kind of go through with my prayers now. That's where I'm at
Yeah,
now. And that's a pretty good
there's
place
a
to be, actually, to tell you the
yeah,
truth.
Yeah.
a
Because
place
it feels
of
like instant
absolute
answers
trust.
almost. But yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
And God's
I've
funny.
always, yeah, I always thought, if I could just get up there and be a janitor, I'll be happy. I don't have to be on the front
Yeah.
row of the choir singing, or playing a musical instrument. Just let me, I'll clean toilets. I don't care. Just let me in.
I
And
mean,
this
this might be part
takes
of
you
the game.
the story of the prodigal son. You know what I mean? He
Yeah.
Oh
goes out
man.
there, thinks he knows how to do it, ends up
Woo.
in squalor, and then
Yeah.
he realizes how bad he like misjudged where he was at and his
Yeah.
arrogance and all that kind of stuff. And he goes back and he says, I am not worthy to return.
Right.
I will work in your fields. I know you have
Mm,
slaves who are eating better than I am. They're drinking better than I am. They're housed better than I am.
right.
I am unworthy. And then his father gives him his own robe and says, welcome back. What are you talking about? You're home.
Yeah.
Like this is your
Yeah.
home. Like, and especially if you go back and you kind of process, because again, I've been on this journey, the process of like back in the day, what that really meant. Like back in the day, having a son come to you prior to even you dying and saying, give me my inheritance would be
Right.
like atrocious. It'd be like,
Yeah.
who are you? And the father does it anyways, says, okay,
Right.
and
Yeah.
then comes back and then there's the whole story of the other son, who's actually upset when he comes
Yes.
back and he's angry with his father, and then he has to realize like, why would I not treat my others? There's just so much to unpack. And And
So
I've
many
been the
views
guy,
in that globe of perspectives, huh?
because I have been the guy who put his tail between his legs and was like, I am a absolute unworthy failure. I am sorry for
Yeah, I have
everything
too.
I've done. And
Yes.
then, and it turns out the world doesn't stop, like the life
Well,
goes on and God's with you the whole time. It's like I imagine him a lot of the times with me. I know this sounds weird, but I'll be like, hanging out and I might be stressing about something and I'll literally try to picture him sitting there and he's never
mm,
saying a word. He's never said one word.
mm,
He's just sitting there and he just looks at me
yeah.
and it's just enough. And I'm like, okay, I need to calm down, because he's relaxed every time. He's just like, okay, I'm here. What do you want? And I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm panicking for what? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, be still. Like I'm constantly wanting to know what's going to happen before it happens.
Yeah.
I want to see the end of the movie so I know that it's a win or if it's a success or something like that. When
Before you
Yeah.
invest 2 hours in it, you want to know if you're going to like it or not at the end of it.
exactly.
Yeah. There's
How
a
That's a
terrible
quote.
is
nice.
that?
That's a nice cheat code.
God gives me life, and I'm like, no, not enough. I want to know what happens at the end of it. You
Yeah.
know,
Uh,
I don't mean to be like pulling apart and like, all this kinds of stuff, but it's funny how it comes up in these moments where it's like you come to realization. Like this is therapy. This is what happens during therapy. You just get to
Yeah.
talking and then you say something and it cracks a door and you start
yeah.
exploring it and then you may say something and you end up working through something and you're like, oh,
Yes.
so the world isn't so bad. So I'm not alone.
Yeah.
I mean, the
You
world's still bad. It's
receive.
just I'm not the only one going through the problems. Everybody goes through the problems. It still has its problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah,
problems don't go away. We
but
just
I'm
understand
not
how to
being
deal
picked
with
on.
them a little bit better.
Yeah, and
But
I'm
it,
not being picked on. This isn't a,
Yeah.
a penalty or anything like that. This is
yeah.
growth. This is
And it is.
development.
It's a
Yeah,
method of healing. Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Well, that's
Well,
amazing. You
there's.
you grab those guys and you get them in that situation because I'm sure just them getting to the place is a huge mountain to climb. Mentally. But once they
Mhm.
get there
Yeah.
and they're able to probably over a 24-hour kind of like sort of relax.
Find a comfort
Mhm.
zone.
They probably don't talk a whole lot. They're just watching what's going on.
Right.
And then maybe something
Yeah.
gets to going. And then they
Hmm.
get they get to talking and they get to
Yeah.
saying stuff out loud that they're thinking. And it's funny, we've said it before, when you say stuff out loud that you're thinking, you suddenly clue into
Yeah.
how either outlandish or extreme or ridiculous it might be. And you almost catch yourself. And you're like, oh, that doesn't sound right.
Well, and I totally agree. You get in there that first day and just, cops and military guys, they're not going to just give you their trust. I mean,
Right.
they're going to watch you, they're going to judge whether or not they can trust you or not. And yeah, it is a very slow process, but I think that's with everything in our life. It's about relationship.
Mhm.
Whether, if I can talk to a guy at work and gain his trust, um, and it's just like you said earlier, I'm not going to beat him over the head talking about Jesus on day one, because just like, I mean, you're going, oh my gosh, the defenses are going to come up.
Right.
But if you can have a relationship and then maybe bring him up in a conversation, all of a sudden it's okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is. It's not just a
Their
beat
natural
somebody over with the
curiosity starts
Bible.
to build up with why you're so happy, why you feel the way
Yeah.
you feel, what's impacting you. What are you doing? Are you drinking something different? No, I'm, going to church a little bit more, reading the Bible. Oh, really? That's working
Yeah.
for you? And then all of a sudden the
Yeah.
natural curiosity starts coming about because they're in a comfortable setting with you. You didn't catch them off
Right.
guard, and you've been
Yeah.
living some sort of an
Right.
example. I mean, even if you make some mistakes, you can still be like, I should have done that afterwards, and be like, and grow from it and learn from it. And if somebody can see you doing that, they can make the associations with everything later on when things come together for them
That's
in
such an
their journey
excellent
when they
point.
call out, when they turn their
Yes.
radar on.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah. Life's great sometimes, isn't it? We are lucky to be here, guys.
At,
amen.
at least we're getting involved now. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
think for
Yeah.
a long time it was just like the world was the world, but now, and it was just going to happen to me and life is life. But now it's like I'm getting more involved in it. Like I'm seeking to see the things that in a way people have almost push people not to seek anymore,
Right.
like it's voodoo or some sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like, no, like,
Oh, I think it's
and
coming
what's,
back around though a lot. I
I
feel like you're
do
seeing it a
I
lot more
totally
now.
agree.
absolutely. And what's
Athletes,
really cool about
movie
it,
people on the award shows,
yeah.
TV
And
shows
what,
themes are going towards it. More podcasts are doing it.
and it's a
Yeah,
lot like AA. And you were just talking about it. It's not about promotion. It's about attraction. And
Mm,
what happens is people start seeing people living better, even through AA. And they're like, what's going on with you? And
yeah,
they're like, I'm in AA, I'm sober, I don't know why, but it's exciting. I'm closer to God and all this kinds of stuff. And he's not saying you should try AA. He's
right.
actually voicing how it's changing his life. And then
Yes.
all of a sudden, this person's like, well, if it works for you, maybe there's something I could possibly use. Most likely not, because I'm
yeah.
fine the way I am, but maybe there's something. And that's the way it
Right.
works with Christianity too, because I've heard many Muslims testimonies where they're like, when they before the reason they transitioned, it wasn't because they were beat over the head. It was
Right.
by Christians. It was because they had been beat over their head their whole life by something else, and then ran into someone who was so gracious, nice, kind, helpful, humble, and they're like, "What are you? How do you live this way all the time?" And then they just go, "Oh, I'm a Christian,
Yeah.
I, and this is Jesus."
Yeah.
Great. And they're like,
Absolutely.
oh, so you actually love your God compared to fear your God. And it's
Yes.
like, that's different.
I've heard
You know?
some. I've heard some where they were trying to find inaccuracies in like the Bible or in study groups or something to try to use against a Christian witness type of thing. They would be prepared for it, and the next thing you know,
Right.
they started believing and fell in line with it. That's one of
Yeah.
my favorite ones. like
Yeah.
like just to
There's
think about the place that you're at. You're so angry and resentful. Like I'm gonna find something in this book to prove
yeah.
you wrong, just to piss you off. First
Yeah.
off, just to that level of unhappiness.
Yeah.
What's going
There's
on
a
in your
couple.
life?
Yeah.
But
There's a couple of books that have been written by guys who have gone into, and I think Lee Strobel had a movie out about this recently, but just the deep dive and the investigation to prove it wrong, and then
yeah,
realize there's so much evidence there that you can't prove it wrong. Everything proves that it is so true, and you come to the realization. I had a Sunday night, I talked with the youth group from our church, and we talked about the centurion of great faith. And the reason he had great faith is because as the centurion and the sheriff of Capernaum, the town they were in, every time Jesus comes in town with 4 or 5 thousand followers, they're expecting a riot because they look at him as a political figure. So the centurion has to get close to him to hear and make sure he's not spouting off all this hatred and vitriol
okay,
against Rome. But as he's standing close to him and he hears the truth and he sees Jesus do the miracle, and all of a sudden there's evidence of that, he goes to Jesus when his slave gets sick and he says, I know you're a man of authority because I'm a man of authority. And he was the highest ranking official in Capernaum, which meant he spoke the words of Caesar. Every time he spoke, he had the authority of Caesar behind him. And he knew that every time Jesus spoke, he had the authority of God behind him. And he said, I get your authority and I know you can do this.
recognized
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm going to say one more thing and I'll stop bringing up all these analogies and whatever it is. But,
Ah, nonsense.
it makes me think of, well, we were talking about how blind we can be to what's really going on because we really have believed that we understand what's going on. And I heard a story one time about it was the Renaissance period, and we now had surgeons in the world who knew how to cut and dice human bodies, fix things as best they could, and they really thought they were on top of their game. But during this period, they had a really high mortality rate for mothers after giving birth,
Mm.
right? And they're like trying to figure out what's going on here, what's not going on here. And one of the doctors said, well, it is rather strange that we do surgeries in the afternoon, or no, we do surgeries in the morning. We don't clean our instruments, and then we do babies in the afternoon. Shouldn't we clean our instruments in between? And they looked at him and they're like, no, you're an idiot. We know everything. We are above and beyond. We are surgeons, blah, blah, blah. it took something like 100 years for them to start cleaning their tools. And guess what happened? The mortality rate went down. So
Oh
the
my gosh.
the moral of that story is a lot of the times we're the problem,
Yeah.
you know, and we don't even realize it because we're
Well,
so focused on what we know.
the more
Uh,
we learn, the more we realize we didn't know anything. We still
yeah,
don't know anything. The more I learn, the more I realize I don't know shit.
you just get humbled and humbled and humbled and humbled and humbled and
Yeah. Yeah.
humbled, and then you're like, I guess I'm just a stack of cells sitting here, like it's consciousness, but like somehow, I'm able to move around and have
Yeah.
feelings and love other people and like
Yeah.
all this kind of stuff.
It was shortly after I became a Christian that I realized it was like being in a train tunnel. And every time I thought I was getting closer to that little circle, it'd get further and further away. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, how far away was I when I started? I didn't even recognize the distance there. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just, yeah, we're so, we're like ants, and
I
he
was
is
just about
just
to say that.
great.
Yes. We're like
We're all
that
great
is
minds, but
little, little tiny.
uh,
Well,
his ways are so much higher. Yeah.
yeah. And it's just funny. It just takes a long time, and then suddenly you feel like no one's looking, and you're like, maybe I'll dip my toe in the water.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
that. I did it with no one looking. I'm just like, maybe I'll just try, and then it and
Yeah.
then it did something. So I'm like, maybe I'll try again, and then
Yeah.
and now I feel like I'm standing in the water saying it's fine, and but I do question
Hmm.
myself, like how is that possible? Like, am I supposed to be saying this and like all this kind of stuff? So like I do get those whispers, like who are you,
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. But I
Yeah.
mean, it's not like when I tell people my story, it's not my testimony, it's God's. Like
Oh,
I
absolutely.
I had nothing to do with it. Like if
Yeah.
anything, I didn't want it. And then like and so I had to. I'm trying to figure out.
It
Anyways,
happened for you.
that's what.
It happened for you and not to you. Something like
Yeah,
that,
That's a
right?
good,
It happened
yes.
for you,
Yeah.
not to you.
Yeah.
yeah,
And,
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
it's not
And I
yours
used
to
to feel
tell.
like
It's yeah.
I'm not a victim. I thought
Yeah.
I was a victim.
Right.
Like God was doing for me what I couldn't do for myself.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Through
it
his
turned.
strength, through our weakness is perfected in his strength, not the other way around.
Yeah.
It's when we recognize our weakness, and you mentioned it earlier about just being humble, and allowing him to work through you. That's the greatest gift. Yeah, I grew up with pretty severe dyslexia. Barely, I only got out of high school because my mom would read books to me, and help me with all my homework, and my grandmother would come over and tutor me. She was a school teacher. Um, when I went to college, I graduated with a 2.03. I mean, by the skin of my teeth.
Yeah,
But later on, God led me to write a devotional book, and it was like being Moses. I'm like, I'm not the guy. You need to pick somebody else. And
right.
he stayed on me, and it was only when I recognized that, hey, this is my major weakness, but in his strength, this could come to fruition, and it
Wow.
did. And it was one of those things, just like you said. It was not, not bragging on myself, but bragging on what God did through me. I mean, because now
Yeah.
there's proof and evidence that it was my weakness, and it still is. I still have trouble with it. But when he comes through and he provides and shows favor, anything can happen.
Wow.
Yeah, he seems to throughout history take everyone's weakness and like find the person who's weakest in the thing he's about to do and then make them the strongest in that. It's God is I call God a gangster sometimes. Like he's just so
He's
cool and like he knows exactly what he's doing and
Yeah,
how to
got a plan.
the
God, yeah,
original OG.
the original
Yeah.
OG,
The OG.
original gangster. Absolutely.
Well, yeah. Can you
Um,
tell what's the title of your book, Chuck? Yeah, let's get your plug in here.
Yeah.
That's one of the
uh,
things we wanted you to get on here. I want to know more about this book. I've only seen the title of it.
Yeah.
uh, it's the latest one is modern day law enforcement Levitical. You can edit this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
uh, The Levitical blueprint for modern day law enforcement. It's a
Okay.
mouthful. What it
Cool.
does though is it takes going through the books of Numbers, Deuteronomy, and Leviticus, and
Okay.
Okay.
looking at it. I started seeing these references to law enforcement. Today, we say Sir Robert Peel is the father of modern day law enforcement. Well, that's not true. When God called the Levites to serve as his public servants, that was the first time. When Moses comes down off the mountain and everybody's having these orgies and he's got the Ten Commandments, he says, "Who will stand up for the Lord?" And the Levites stepped over the line. He said, "Draw your swords and get to work." There's 5 times in the Bible where God gives the Levites the authority to use deadly force in the commission of their duties. Um, he talks about retirement for Levites. He talks about being able to or having to violate the law in order to enforce the law. As a
Right.
cop, you know you got if you're going to catch that guy going 80 miles an hour, you're going to have to go over 80 to catch up to him. So you violate the law to enforce the law. That's in the Bible. The law of arrest is in Nehemiah. Um, the color blue. God picked the color blue for law enforcement. If you
Wow.
look at the Levites, their uniform is blue. He gives them this uh, badge, this shield that has the name of the people they represent on the badge. He gives them these shoulder patches we call ephods with the names of the people they represent, just like the patch that a cop wears.
Hmm.
It is just, I mean, it
Wow.
just over and over and over. If you pull out the Levites in the Bible, you see they were God's public servants, even to the point where they were one of the 12 tribes of Israel. But God said, nope, you're no longer one of the 12 tribes of Israel. You're going to be set apart and you're going to be different. And you have no inheritance with anybody else, but you will always work at the temple. And I'm going to create this sacrificial system where people bring in their bulls to be sacrificed. And that's what you are going to eat. In other
Okay.
words, taxes.
Yep.
The Israelites paid taxes at the temple that provided for all the Levites. Whenever there was a dead body found, the Levites were the ones who had to go out and measure the distance between the body and the nearest town. The nearest town then had to investigate, and their Levites would come out and investigate the murders.
Oh.
All the judges who were appointed over the 12 tribes were Levites. I mean, it's just throughout the Bible.
Wow.
I
It
didn't
is
know
a
any of that.
it's a blueprint for today's law enforcement, and it is so cool. But um,
That
yeah,
is so
And,
cool.
and the book
so
just kind of outlines it all and gives the references and makes the comparisons and talks about it.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I was thinking you're going to go into like one of the archangels, like Michael or what? Who was the police officer's archangel? Isn't that Michael?
Michael.
Was it?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And the crazy thing about that, okay, the very first law enforcement official were the two angels with the flaming swords guarding the Garden of Eden. So
Mm.
it's
Wow.
just it's so rich
Well,
throughout
they
the
should be
Bible.
fired because the devil slithered in there anyway, didn't he?
I've heard a lot of people say no, that the devil was the original cherubim. He was responsible for guarding the Garden of Eden, and he was derelict in his duties when he tempted Eve. I don't
Okay.
like the thought of him being the first law enforcement officer, so I
Right.
pass him up and I go to the cherubim. The
Push
good
that out of the way.
guys. It
Yeah.
can't be that bad guy.
Uh,
But yeah,
that's an interesting thought process. I do that a lot
yes,
too. Wonder, like in my mind, I make up little stories or something that I think would be a good sitcom or a good movie
right.
idea or whatever. It could be funny, it could be serious, it could be religious. And with the religious ones, it's often it's like what it was like when they were friends and they were happy and everybody was good, and what it was like when he fell. And
Uh
having
huh.
that, just like, I never even heard that one. At one point in time, he was one of the angels
Oh,
guarding the Garden of Evil, and that was part of his demise and his fall to be the falling star. I have never heard
right.
that one before, but that's interesting.
Well, if you
Um,
take that, he was the guardian cherubim, and he was by himself when that happened. From that point on, every time in the Bible when you see cherubim, they're in pairs.
they
Um,
partnered up to
They have partnered up. That's exactly right. So
well,
accountability buddies.
yeah,
yeah.
it really yeah.
We loved working together because we didn't normally work in 2-man cars either. But when we
Right.
got into 2-man cars, I mean, we just had we got our system
Oh
going down, and it wasn't
yeah.
necessarily about being less. bad or whatever because we were fine to begin with. But like, yeah, he's driving, I'm on the computer.
Yeah.
I make the arrest
Yeah.
and I do the paperwork. Then I drive and he's on the computer and he makes the arrest and then he goes does the
Sure.
paperwork.
Yeah. Well, there's an accountability there. If I'm riding by myself on midnight shift and I get tired, I may pull over and take a nap. But if I got a partner with me,
Yeah.
he's going to drive and I'm going to be
No.
on the
When you have the
passenger
partner
side.
with you, you can take the nap because somebody can watch for you. I could never fall asleep in the car by myself. I could never do it.
Me
I
either.
would wake to the terrible, not wake, but like that half little nod. I'd go, what? Because I swear somebody's watching me.
Yeah.
Somebody's got a
All the
recorder on me,
time.
or somebody's
Yeah.
getting ready to
Yeah.
shoot me, or whatever. All those fears just pop in. You're like, nope,
Yeah.
can't do it. But if
Yeah.
I had a
And
partner, I
nowadays
could
it's
take
a
a little nap or
reality.
whatever.
Yeah.
You watch everything for a second.
I was so paranoid I'd miss a call. Not that that would ever happen, but if I was just
Yeah.
like, asleep and then now I miss a call and now something important's happening and now I didn't show up and now something happened,
Yeah.
like my
Yeah.
gosh, I don't want to live with that. So
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm, I'm gonna stay
No
up.
doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All very
Well,
interesting. But that's not the. That's not. I guess that's not the book. I thought I was. That's your latest one. You have
Yes.
several books or multiple, more than one.
Yeah. Um,
Okay.
I've got
Good for you.
probably 9. So
9.
Wow. I didn't know
yeah.
that.
Gee.
Yeah. Well,
So
nobody does. My
God
mom
took a
does. She bought them all.
Yeah. Your biggest fan. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's
Or
so
So,
funny. God took a kid who was
dyslexic.
dyslexic
Made him an
oh,
author.
who has now written 9 books.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Like, that's a miracle. I hope
Glory
you
to
realize
God.
that. Yeah, all
Amen.
glory.
Yeah.
That's the other
So,
thing, realizing that like none of your accomplishments actually belong to you. You know,
absolutely.
it's
Can't claim
That's part of
credit
that
for any of
humbling
it.
your ego there is getting to that part.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And if we don't do it ourselves, he'll do it for us.
Oh, yes,
And
he
man,
will.
I
yeah.
sure don't want him to have to.
In a nanosecond. He'll do a good job of it, too.
Y-
That's right.
Yeah.
I'd rather do it myself.
And it won't be the road you want to take either.
Oh,
It
well,
will
that is
not
the
be the road. It'll
truth.
get you there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It'll get you there.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Well, I tell you what, guys, I think this has been an amazing conversation. I'm so
Amen.
glad we were able to get together and do it. Thank you so much, Charles, for sharing what you've shared. Do you
Absolutely.
have any social media or anything like that you'd like other people to potentially seek you out on? Because you do some posts, don't you?
Yeah. I post some little 3 minute, 2 to 3 minute videos every day just from my Bible read. But on YouTube, it's just Charles Gilliland, and that takes you to my channel, my
Yeah,
YouTube channel.
yeah.
And yeah, so you can watch. There's like 400 videos in there, so you can just
All right.
Nice.
But
Little,
and
Been
little.
seeing
usually,
some of the 3 minute daily clips come around. I've been seeing them come up on my feed. I
oh,
enjoy them.
good,
I'm loving them. I try
good.
to give you some likes and shares and stuff on those too.
I
But
appreciate it.
I will go to the YouTube one and look at some of the back pages and see what's been going on.
Yeah,
Cool.
let's get on
I
there.
enjoy
Let's
doing
let's subscribe to it. Everyone out there, let's
it.
subscribe,
Yeah,
get some views so
give
that
him a
his
subscribe and some likes and shares, even if you don't like it for
Woo.
real.
Yeah,
Somebody else
absolutely.
might.
If that tool is not meant for you, it may be meant for somebody else down the road. So always
absolutely.
remember that.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you again, guys. Love you for doing this. And everyone out there, have a great week. We hope that what we brought you is going to get you through this one. And we can't wait to see you next week. God
All right.
bless.
God bless.
All right, guys, wherever you are watching or listening from, please like, subscribe, share, and if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a comment, a review, whatever you can do for us so we can get it to more people. We love you. Talk to you soon.